Well, hello there, and we now know the Final Four for the 2024 NCAA Men's Basketball Tournament as the Purdue Boilermakers. And what is it with these guys? The 11th seeded NC State Wolfpack are the final two pieces to the puzzle, joining UConn and Alabama in Arizona for later this week. Somebody will walk out of there as the 2024 national champion. I am the somewhat capable host, TJ Rives. He is Jason Powers, hanging out here with me again on the Sunday night live version of the show. We have just witnessed chronologically NC State putting the finishing touches, I don't think it's an overstatement, on one of the most remarkable runs that we have seen in a 3-weekend period for a team that was nowhere near the radar of the NCAA tournament to now be in the Final Four, because this team has now won 9 straight postseason games in about 2.5 weeks. It's crazy. They're in. Purdue is in. So we're ready to talk all about that. First of all, Jason, welcome. Good to have you. Brackets blown up everywhere because I'd love to see a bracket that has Alabama and NC State, by the way.
Absolutely. I mean, what an opening day. I know we'll get into it. What an opener today in the Midwest region. What a game that was.
Yes.
And kind of and what a second half burst that NC State put on. I mean, they just dominated the game in the second half. And DJ Burns continues to, all of us YMCA players and everywhere in the country, you just keep showing that it doesn't matter what you look like, you can get it done. Apparently,
he's got the defensive tackle body, or the dad bod, is the 2020s terms. The dad bod going, and it doesn't matter. He's skilled. He's light on his feet, even at 6'7", 6'8", with the wide body. Can make shots. He's a big story, and NC State is a phenomenal story. It is the first time since 1983 that they are in a Final Four. That's the Jim Valvano tremendous run to beat Phi Slama Jama and Houston for the national title. And for Purdue, it's the first time since 1980. Joe Barry Carroll was the star player. Lee Rose, our colleague and friend Mark Wise, was one of the assistants with Lee Rose, the head coach. Yep. Purdue has not been there in a long time, but they will now play each other. Purdue and NC State, along with UConn and Alabama. So thank you for finding us. We're on the live platforms of college basketball coast to coast on Twitter, on Facebook, and also on YouTube. Thank you for hanging out here with us. If you're hearing us after the fact in podcast form or on the TuneIn live channel, College Basketball Coast to Coast, we were doing this live, obviously, in the early evening, Easter Sunday night. Hopefully everybody had a great Easter. Happy Easter, everybody, as we hang out here tonight and do the show. But if you're hearing us after the fact, obviously we did the show live as the video show. We'll be live in Arizona starting on Friday here on College Basketball Coast to Coast on the social platforms, on the YouTube channel, and as well you'll hear recaps on podcast form, etc. Just look for College Basketball Coast to Coast anywhere that you're going there. So with all the promo material out of the way, let's just go chronologically, you and I. Let's go first with Purdue and the win over Tennessee. What a battle in the Midwest Regional Final, the 1 versus the 2. It lived up to what we thought it would be. It lived up to Zach Edey, the player of the year in the Big Ten, and probably the national player of the year, against the SEC's top player, Dalton Knecht of Tennessee. Those guys delivered. The game delivered. Jason, your thoughts watching all that?
It was a tremendous back and forth game. Both superstars, consensus All-Americans, played. 40 points for Edey, 37 for Knecht. Every time their team needed a shot, they delivered. And the story of this game was, I mean, I don't know how many possessions in a row, but it seemed like every single possession, the last 15 minutes of the game, it got dumped into the low post to Edey, and he either got fouled or created an easy shot for somebody else. But I mean, boy, what a performance by Edey when the pressure was at its absolute max for that Purdue program.
Again, time and again, he is able to make plays, make free throws. They didn't win the Big Ten tournament. That went to Illinois. But here he was money. Dalton Knecht with the big 3-point shots, a couple of fast break, huge plays for him. I mean, this was heavyweight title stuff in the middle of the ring, throwing haymakers, and Purdue just made 2 or 3 more huge threes late, got a couple of stops. Edey, again, there's going to be a lot of talk about this. A lot of contact involving him without fouls being called. I even put it on social media as that second half was unfolding. it's almost criminal with all the contact that Tennessee's bigs had 8 fouls, 10 fouls, 11 fouls called on them. None on Zach Edey at that point. He eventually picked up a foul or two later on. But, man, they let him at both ends just get away at 7'5" and 300 pounds with all kinds of contact without fouls. There's no doubt about that.
One thing I'll say, though, Tennessee put zero offensive pressure on Edey on the defensive end. Most of the contact was when Edey was in the post boxing out for rebounds. And I'll be honest with you, I didn't think Edey did a whole lot as far as he wasn't running through people. He wasn't barreling through guys to get layups. He was pretty nimble. Sure, could you have called it a ticky-tack rebound foul, maybe one? Yeah, but I thought Edey did a pretty good job of controlling his body when he would get the offensive rebounds or when he would post up. He wasn't dropping his shoulder and barreling through the Tennessee defender. And the Tennessee offensive guys on offense, they were putting very little pressure on Edey to make the referees blow the whistle on the offensive end for Tennessee.
Again, the end result is a 72-66 win. Edey gets 40, and 16 rebounds to be named the most outstanding player of the Midwest Regional. And again, Purdue had gotten to this point on previous occasions, including Gene Cady, who was in the building in Detroit, and Glenn Big Dog Robinson. Right. They got to the Elite Eight but couldn't win this game. Purdue, which has had horrific upset after horrific upset, none bigger than the 16-seed upset of a year ago by Fairleigh Dickinson, FDU, knocking them out as a 16-seed. But, I mean, they had previously lost to St. Peter's, a 15-seed, had lost to North Texas in the 2021 tournament as a 13-seed, had lost to a 14-seed, Arkansas Little Rock. They had a lot of shortcomings. Guess what wipes that away? A run to the Final Four. They overcame. They're the regular season champs in the Big Ten, a rugged conference. And now they push through, and they will head to the desert in Arizona representing the Big Ten. Jason, kudos to Matt Painter. Kudos to those players that played tougher and better than Tennessee when it mattered the most.
Key player for me in the second half was Lance Jones. He did a pretty good job on Connect. That's a tough matchup, and boy, he made it more difficult the last 10 minutes of the game on Connect. He contested. He did a pretty good job. They switched a lot. Him and Lawyer switched a lot onto Connect. And Lance Jones with the huge three. They were up 3, Purdue was, with about 2 minutes to go. And Edey kicks it out to Lance Jones, and Lance Jones hits a monster 3 from the right wing at about the 2-minute mark to put him up 6 and really create some separation. But kudos to those guys. And again, Connect played an unbelievable game. He didn't get much help he didn't get much help from Ziegler. He didn't get much help from Jordan James. The centers, Adu and Aquara, they did nothing on the offensive end, which really hurt Tennessee.
Right. They battled foul trouble, had problems, got out-rebounded. Tennessee 47-26 of the game. How about Purdue only made 3 threes the whole game? 2 of them, though, were in the final 5 minutes when they had to have them. Tennessee, by contrast, made 11 of 26. But the rebounding edge was big. Tennessee only turned it over 7 times, 10 turnovers for Purdue. But Edey, massive with 40 points. Purdue shot 33 free throws to 11 for Tennessee. That'll get brought up as well. But the Boilermakers were better. A valiant run for Tennessee. They get the win over Creighton, and they were right there. This was a tie game with about 5 minutes to go. Could have gone either way there in the final 5 minutes, and Purdue went and took it from them. Again, if you're just joining us, if you're just seeing us, we're live here on the College Basketball Coast to Coast platforms. Thank you for finding us on the Twitter handle CBB Coast to Coast with the number 2, CBB Coast to Coast. Also on the YouTube page, College Basketball Coast to Coast, as well as Facebook. We're sharing it out everywhere. Get us a comment or 2 in if you like. TJ and Jason hanging out. So Purdue gets it done in Motown in Big Ten country. They head to Arizona, where they will now play the 11 seed NC State. So a funny thing happened on the way to the bank for me, raking in with a Duke win today, a Duke Final Four victory over Purdue. I was going to be golden, shoulda, coulda, woulda in some brackets. Duke had the lead. Duke had the lead at halftime. Duke had the lead in the first 3 minutes of the second half. How and why did NC State reverse what was an 8-point deficit to eventually be out in front by 14 points in the final 5 minutes of the game? How and why did that happen?
I think you just saw the veteran experience of NC State have a lot of older guys. They just played a little bit tougher than Duke. Because Duke's had the moniker that they might be a little soft. Filipowski did not play very tough. The guards were not very strong with the ball. And give DJ Horn, give Morsel, give Middlebrooks. Those guys were just kept hanging in there with it. And DJ Burns, say what you want, the guy delivered every time they needed a bucket. He just overpowered Filipowski and Mitchell and just made every play they had to make. And one thing I loved at the end of the game, that when Duke started to press with about 5 minutes to go, they attacked the pressure. They didn't sit on it. They attacked the pressure and got 2 or 3 layups on that. That was a great. I love that they did that. Beat the pressure by attacking the pressure.
And go ahead and score. And they got a couple of different easy layup scores there at the end when Duke was trying to have some glimmer of hope. Again, Filipowski in foul trouble. I sent you a couple of text messages. You and I are constantly in communication with the words soft, 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 like 4 times. What happened to them up 31-23? I just went back and looked. They got a made bucket to go up 31-23, 3 minutes into the second half. From then on, it's like they were in a fog, weak shots, not getting loose balls, not getting defensive rebounds. John Shire trying to take a couple timeouts when he saw it starting to get away from them because NC State was more aggressive, tougher, getting the loose balls, getting the second chance points, guarding them, physical, get on the floor. Duke just did not respond physically, and you look up, and it ended up being a 35-13 switch around, 35-13 to get up by a 58-44 margin. This was well earned by NC State. They completely outplayed them, Jason Powers.
No, absolutely. There's no doubt. And the guys, the O'Connells made key jumpers. When they have their moments, those guys made their shots. And again, the guard play. You got Horn, you got Morsel, and then you got O'Connell. They really handled the ball well, didn't turn it over much. And they didn't let anybody for Duke other than McCain. I know McCain had a big game point-wise, and some of those were garbage points late, but McCain was the only factor that really Duke had. Roach is really not a big score. He kind of got manhandled. Proctor was okay. And again, once Filipowski, you could tell Filipowski was just getting totally flustered. He kept getting tangled up with guys. He was moaning and complaining to the officials. He epitomized your 4-letter word soft for me today.
And they were soft taking the ball to the basket. They were soft guarding, including in the perimeter, just not what you need if you want to try to get it done in an Elite 8 game. Not what we're accustomed to with Duke. That is for sure. And again, the name is DJ Burns. Dwight Keith Burns Jr. DJ Burns, who is a 2-time transfer. He was actually at Tennessee for his freshman year. Wow, he was then at Winthrop, the former Big South Player of the Year a couple of years ago at Winthrop, who transferred to NC State. He's the story. We keep talking about this big body, 6'7", probably listed at about 270. He may be well north of that, but agile, good passer, finisher at the rim. He is going to be an even bigger darling than he's already been these last 3 weekends, DJ Burns.
Absolutely, no doubt. He's going to have his hands full of Zach Edey coming up. He's going to be giving up about 7 inches, and the weight's going to be about equal, so that's going to be very interesting how NC State decides to play that, but we'll worry about that next week. But you're right. He'll be the darling of the media for the next 4 or 5 days as you descend upon Phoenix, and boy, I bet he will have an NIL deal or two before the end of the night here in place.
Yeah, for the final 4 weeks, sure. Burns finished with 29 in the game. Again, he and Horn were the only 2 guys that were basically scoring for about 75% of this game, and Duke just never responded. Amazing that it was set up, almost handed to them to get revenge on NC State and go to the Final Four. This is the same NC State team that beat them in the ACC tournament 2 weeks ago. And again, we touched on this last night. For those who did not see it, did not hear it. I mean, Jason, they had to win 5 games in 5 days, obviously, beating Duke and then beating North Carolina in the title game to do it. But it was almost over before it ever began for Kevin Keats's team. They lost the final 4 games of the regular season. And on the opening night of the ACC tournament, and kind of like the play-in warm-up bracket, they were in trouble in game number 1, reiterated.
down to Louisville at the half, one of the worst teams in America at the half. And if you remember in the second round game, I think it was the second round game, or maybe the third, the semifinals, Virginia's up 3 with less than 5 seconds to go. If they foul like they should have in the last 5 seconds, O'Connell makes a miracle 3-pointer bank shot to get the game to overtime because Tony Bennett doesn't foul and they beat Virginia overtime, or it's all over against Virginia in the ACC tournament.
It's another great point. So they won 5 games in 5 days, NC State. They get seeded 11th in this tournament, come in and beat Texas Tech in the opening game, and then got a break. Didn't have to play Kentucky. Got to play tiny Oakland University out of the Horizon League, who had upset Kentucky. But here we go back to how fragile this thing can be. I've heard that said so many times, so many ways over the last 30, 40 years of watching and covering this, because Oakland had the ball with the game tied, with a chance to win the game. You and I were together having food at a sports restaurant, and it's like, are they going to hit the winning shot here? And Oakland's going to be the Sweet 16 team. They turn it over. They throw the ball away. There's all the replay review controversy.
Review of did it hit his finger and all that.
The player's finger, who's it off of? The end result is Oakland got no shot, literally, to win the game at the end of regulation. The game goes to OT. NC State outplays them in the OT, wins that game, comes to Dallas and completely outplayed Marquette from about 5 minutes in on Friday night, completely outplayed Marquette, led by double figures. Never threatened. They shot it much better Friday night than they did in this game. And now you come into this game, and it's, again, it's puzzling as to how Duke, who had everything in front of them to just get revenge and go to the Final Four, has the better talent, obviously, but NC State said, you know what, that doesn't matter. And maybe part of it, let's illuminate this, is the fact that DJ Horn, the guard, is a transfer. He's a graduate player. Middlebrooks is a transfer who is also a fifth-year player. Yep. The veteran players and the composure to not get rattled in Big D tonight when they were down, and even down in the second half by 8, didn't get rattled, just kept playing their game, and eventually between Burns, the big man, and Horn hitting a couple of big threes, they got enough makes to now get momentum. And Duke, too soft, couldn't come back on them in the end.
And the other bit of familiarity, this is the third time they've played Duke this year, so they know these guys. They know the offensive schemes, the defensive schemes they like to run. They're not they're an ACC foe with those guys. They all live and work within about 10 miles of each other.
That's right.
So they all know each other. They all play with it together in the summertime. So there's familiarity with these guys, and it's not, it's the experience of NC State versus the talent and the youth of Duke, and the last two meetings, the desperation of NC State has won out.
So once again, an 11 seed is in the Final Four. This is the first time since UCLA was an 11 seed in 2021. Again, that was the COVID-19 crazy compressed tournament. All of it was in greater Indianapolis, essentially. And so there was no travel. Everybody's staying in the same hotel in a bubble. You're just showing up, practice play, go to the next game, practice play, different arenas. Yes. Eventually they settled inside of Lucas Oil Stadium for the Final Four and for the championship game. But UCLA got to that Final Four, lost to Gonzaga after being in the first 4 as an 11 seed. Now, previous to that, Loyola of Chicago, Porter Moser's team, won the Missouri Valley tournament, kind of like NC State, had to win the Missouri Valley to get the only bid, to get the automatic bid, then came in and upset Miami as the 2 seed right away in the round of 32 game. The second round game, came through the Sweet 16 out of Atlanta, and that was an 11 seed that made the Final Four in San Antonio before they got wiped out in that Final Four. I believe it was Villanova who took them out in that game. All right, we go back to another 11 seed, which is Shaka Smart's Virginia Commonwealth team in 2010, also played in the first 4, came out of there and beat Georgetown and Purdue and Matt Painter, by the way, in 2010, eventually beat number 1 seed Kansas before going to Houston and losing in the Final Four to Butler. There were 2 upstarts in that Final Four, and Butler beat Virginia Commonwealth that year. And you even made mention of this, and I've gone back and double checked. Yes, George Mason, the Patriots of 2006, They end up winning over UConn on Easter Sunday, the number 1 seed, to beat them. Jim Larinaga there with George Mason. What was it? Jai Lucas, Tony Skinn. Tony Skinn is now the coach at George Mason. They defeat UConn. They go to the Final Four. They lost to the eventual national champion Florida Gators in Indianapolis. But, brother, that's 4 previous times we've had an 11 seed. Now make it 5, a handful. Make it 5 times with NC State, an 11 seed in the 2000s, has made the Final Four, Jason.
And here's the other nugget about this, about all those other teams. They didn't have to win 5 conference tournament games.
That's right.
And UConn with Kemba Walker, the only 2 that I can remember that had to win 5 tournament games to get into the NCAA. Most of these other conferences, you had to win 3, maybe 4 to get in. But NC State had to win 5 in 5 days just to get into the NCAA tournament. Reminds me a little bit of Kemba. I don't know what UConn, what seed they were that year, probably an 8 or 9, maybe when Kemba.
And they won the whole thing. They won the whole thing.
5 conference tournament games they had to win to get into the tournament.
And that was that 2010 tournament where they eventually beat Butler in the title game after having won 5 Big East games in a row. And that included the incredible 6 overtime game, I believe. Yes. 6 overtimes against Syracuse. They were living the charmed life for sure on that for Connecticut. Again, the closest comparison would probably be the Loyola Chicago team. I don't know if UCLA won the automatic bid in the Pac-12. We'd have to double check 2021. I'll check it in a second. But I know Loyola Chicago had to, on the high wire, win all the Missouri Valley games and then won the 4 games to get to the Final Four.
Yep.
But again, NC State has done this, and it's bringing up shades of 1983 and Jim Valvano and Miracle Run. They're going to talk all about that again for this week now that they're there. That was in Albuquerque, New Mexico, 1 state over from the Glendale/Phoenix, Arizona area where NC State returns. Amazing that we're talking about them to play Purdue. Jason, go ahead.
And the storyline, they'd have to slay 2 more giants, the absolute 1 and 2 giants in the country to win this whole thing. I know they beat Georgia back in '83 in the semifinal. They weren't a juggernaut, but we know Houston was. Can you imagine if they were to beat Purdue and then turn around and beat Connecticut to win this whole thing? I mean, that would be the greatest run of all time.
There are pipe dreams, and then there's that dream. But right now, how do you go against these guys with the momentum? Good luck against Godzilla with UConn if it comes to it. But how do you not give them a puncher's chance against Purdue? Purdue showed some vulnerability even against Gonzaga in the first half. And also for a lot of that Tennessee game, it was a back and forth game from earlier today.
Down 11 early.
Wow. And they roared back. And again, the Boilermakers in the Final Four for the first time since 1980. NC State, the first time since 83. Alabama on the other side of the bracket, the first time ever. So we got a lot of new blood. Certainly first time for Alabama, but the other ones haven't been there in 40 plus years to go along with Connecticut, the defending national champs. By the way, the NCAA did announce a little while ago that the NC State-Purdue game will be the first game up just after 6 Eastern time on TBS nationally from State Farm Stadium in Glendale, Arizona. The UConn-Alabama game will be the nightcap. I can assure you with 1,000,000% certainty, had Duke won the game, that's what they were waiting on, Duke would have been your late game with Purdue for the television ratings. Instead, NC State doesn't rate the same way. They'll play Purdue in the first game. The UConn-Alabama game will come off somewhere around 9 p.m., 8:55, 9 p.m. in the desert Eastern time. That is just before 6 p.m. local time in the greater Phoenix area in the Pacific time zone. Cannot wait to see all of this unfold. Interesting when you talk that previous Final Four, North Carolina was an ACC representative that was there. South Carolina was the SEC representative that was there. The other 2 teams were Gonzaga and Oregon out of the Pacific Northwest. We had the Carolinas and then the Pacific Northwest. That was what was there. Now you got the SEC with Alabama. You got the Big East all the way up in New England with UConn. You got Purdue to cover the Midwest and NC State to cover Tobacco Road. No Western team, but you got a lot of the geography of the, let's say, Central and Eastern time zone half of the United States covered with that.
And want to give a shout out, if you haven't seen it, folks, Check out on social media the 3 or 4 minute piece that CBS did on Chris Stewart. Tremendous.
Yes.
I know Chris has had some health issues the last 4 or 5 years. It's an unbelievable little 4 or 5 minute story they did with Chris, a guy we know, the Alabama play-by-play guy, about his road to recovery physically from a couple of health issues.
Sure.
And he's back in the seat calling, obviously, the first Alabama Final Four. What a job by CBS in doing that, and a great job by Chris letting them do that, letting them tell his story.
Yeah, Chris suffered a stroke back 5 years ago, and then subsequently began to develop health problems and actually had heart problems and had to have open heart surgery and was in a coma for the better part of a couple of weeks, near death, but rallied from that, has learned how to walk and talk again and be on the air again. Phenomenal story. And you and I are partial to him, love him personally. So Chris is on the Alabama radio broadcast, the Crimson Tide Sports Network call coming up. Another shout out here. I made mention of this last night as we rock on college basketball coast to coast, and I see our live audience growing. Thank you for finding us. TJ Rives, Jason Powers here. If you're listening in podcast form on the replay, you know who we are, but we were doing this live on Sunday night. Another shout out here for the audience that's joining us on the live video show on the social media handles, also hearing us on the TuneIn streaming channel as well. Gary Hahn, the 34-year play-by-play voice of the NC State Wolfpack, will now get to call a Final Four after announcing his retirement back during the football season. He announced back in November that this would be his final year, athletic year of 2023-2024 to broadcast games for NC State. So he finished out the football season, and then let's be honest, he's working the final few ACC regular season basketball games where they lost 4 in a row. I bet if you gave the truth serum to our man Gary Hahn, he would confess he never dreamed that 3 weeks later he would be talking about Wolfpack, 5 wins in 5 nights for the ACC title, and now 4 wins in 2 weekends. 9 postseason wins for NC State. Gary Hahn, 34 years at the mic, gets to call a Final Four game with Purdue, Jason.
Shout out to him, and obviously, and the Purdue fans and the fan base at Purdue. As much heartbreak as they've gone through, kind of like a Virginia situation from a couple years back. It's good for Matt Painter because he's done a hell of a job at Purdue he's been there close to 20 years.
Right.
After he followed Gene Cady, he's had a lot of really good teams. And he said in the post game, we had to sit in it all year after what happened to Fairleigh Dickinson. You imagine the pressure on those kids all year on campus and all the grief they had to take this time last year by losing, and just give that group and that program credit for hanging in there. Those kids came back, they improved, and they the fruit of their labor has come to fruition as of today.
And you make mention of what happened in 2018 and 2019. It's worth bringing up again. It'll be brought up 53 times. And by the way, CBS and Turner have done a feature documentary a short that's going to be about a 10 or 15-minute documentary on how Virginia overcame the loss to UMBC, Maryland, Baltimore County, as a 16 seed and went on in 2019 to win the whole thing in Minnesota. And I got the privilege to be there and watch all of that unfold as they eventually defeated Texas Tech in the championship game. Are we potentially looking at the same thing again? A loss to a 16 seed for Purdue a year ago. You can't win the whole thing unless you get to the Final Four. Purdue has now done that. How crazy would this be if they get past NC State and they have a chance to duplicate the humiliation to the ecstasy 1 year to the next, lose to a 16 seed? And it wasn't the exact same team for Virginia. It's not the exact same team for Purdue.
But a lot of the same
1
pieces.
year to the next and the same coach, they're a step away from having a shot at it. The Purdue Boilermakers, incredible.
And they're going to be heavy favorites against NC State, as will Connecticut. And that, if you really look at it, X's and O's, Purdue's the one team that can probably match up with Connecticut. You got Klingon against Edey. You got some good guard play. You got Braden Smith. You got Lawyer. Connecticut would still be a favorite, but I think Purdue is the one team that could give Connecticut some problems because they're efficient and they got the low post guy that can deal with Klingon.
Got some viewer comments coming in here. Our buddy Spitz on Sports is watching us, and Spitz says Purdue was more physical and deserved those free throws. They did shoot 33 free throws to just 11 for Tennessee. Spitz, thanks for watching. We appreciate it. And Zach Edey was a big portion of that, getting Tennessee in foul trouble. He finishes with 40 points.
Career high, by the way. Career high.
Yeah, no kidding. In the biggest moment when they had to have it to go to the Final Four for the first time since Joe Barry Carroll. Nobody knows that name anymore. He was a big deal in the late 80s, in the early 80s in the NBA.
Yep.
I want to say Joe Barry Carroll was a former number 1 overall pick out of Purdue.
Golden State
now
Warrior.
Zach Edey is the new name here in the present in 2024 for that win. So great stuff here as we rock on here on the program. If you got another comment or two, throw it in. Jason will sit here with me for a couple of more minutes while we talk this over. By the way, we should make mention as well, if you know of anybody that's headed out there, maybe you're trying to head out there yourselves into the desert to go see what's going to happen between UConn, Alabama, Purdue, and NC State, and you're trying to get your hands on tickets, use our sponsor, Ticket Smarter, the Ticket Smarter mobile app, and get in with the best prices on the secondary market. You're not going to beat the Ticket Smarter algorithm for the best, most effective, efficient service and price. Your purchase is secure. It's guaranteed, including a money-back guarantee. If for some reason you can't go, you don't want the tickets, etc., they'll take care of you with customer service. Again, Ticket Smarter is going to beat most of the other market apps out there on the secondary market. And we got a promo code offer. Take $20 off the order with our promo code COAST20. Now, if Duke had won in Dallas, good luck getting any kind of a seat in the lower level for under $500 or $800. Maybe the best seats, $800 or $1,000. Now that Duke lost, it's not everything. Purdue's fans will be descending. NC State's fans will be descending. UConn wants to repeat. Alabama's never been there. I get it. You're not going to get into this game, Jason, for a single game ticket under $300 for the good seats. Maybe you can get in the top of State Farm Stadium for under $300, but not the good seats. Use our promo code COAST20, brother. COAST20, Ticket Smarter mobile app. Any purchase $300 or more, take $20 off on us, on the show, on college basketball coast to coast with the promo code COAST20. And this is good for the Final Four. It's good for other stuff as well.
Baseball, hockey, wherever you're at in the country, use this code for whatever event you want to get into, whether it's theater, whether it's sports, music, concerts, whatever. I want to ask you a question, because I know you've been in the facility for basketball. Give the audience a little sense of the facility for basketball, the arena. Is it what, 60,000 capacity? What's the ballpark capacity?
It's probably closer to 70 because of all the seats on the floor. What is the football field configuration? And what's interesting is I've been there a bunch. I've been there for the college football playoff championship win by Alabama over Clemson. Back in 2015. I've been there several times with the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. I was there Christmas night of 2022 with Tom Brady and the Buccaneers. And that 2017 Final Four was in this same stadium, State Farm Stadium. Again, what they do now is they put the court elevated right in the middle of the football field configuration. Then they have the stands wrapping around the lower bowl as well, kind of down on the football field with the elevated court. The elevated court allows people in the upper levels to see a little better as well. It will legitimately be 70,000 plus in that building. And you'll hear so much about sight lines and about tough background because it's a dome.
Depth perception.
First half scoring will be an issue probably for both games. But then again, shooters shoot. And they've been playing these things in football stadiums, whether it's the Superdome in New Orleans. I mentioned US Bank Stadium, the Vikings stadium that they played it in 2019. A year ago, it was in Houston. NRG Stadium. They've played in this one. They've played in Indianapolis at Lucas Oil Stadium. On and on down the list in these football stadiums. Jerry's World, AT&T Stadium. Let's see. They've gone to this to be able to include an extra 25,000 more people that can see it, come watch the game, and be part of the event. And I'm going to say again, this is the best event in sports. These last 2 weekends, culminating now with the Final Four next weekend, you cannot top the one-and-done drama, the excitement. That Tennessee-Purdue game, are you kidding me? I mean, how about the drama of Alabama and Clemson for somebody trying to make their first ever Final Four back on Saturday night in Los Angeles? I know it was the two Southern teams all the way out on the left coast in Hollywood, but it was a Hollywood Inn for Alabama. They've never been there before. The plane, by the way, Jason Powers touched down in Tuscaloosa about 4 Central Time, 5 Eastern Time, about 3 hours ago as we do this live. Nate Oates came off the plane with the West Regional Trophy, and I'm going, that's not the trophy you want to be showing everybody off the plane. You want the trophy if you can get it. But again, there's nothing that tops this. NC State was nowhere to be found. Nowhere else do you get this, that they won 5 games in 5 days just to get into the dance, and now have made their way to the NCAA tournament.
Kevin Keats probably gets fired if they don't win the tournament. Yeah. He's very likely to get fired on the hot seat if they don't win.
They had a couple of seasons where they had underperformed. He's had them in the NCAA tournament previously, but Kevin Keats is like the Toby Keith song I keep referencing, the late Toby Keith that we lost earlier this year, the country #1 crooning artist. How do you like me now? Because suddenly they win those 5 games in 5 days. And they have flipped a switch. I thought DJ Burns was great after the game when asked, what have you put together here, especially in the NCAA tournament, even off the ACC tournament, 5 games in 5 days. And he said, attention to detail. And we stopped fighting with each other on the practice court, on the game court. We've come together. We're on time for meetings. He said
threw out some dirty laundry. How about that? We've been late. People have been late.
The results are obviously there, that they have come together. Kevin Keats has gotten them to come together as well. He's got a military background too, by the way. He's not going to mess around with that kind of stuff. Keats, again, to be his agent and whether they're going to renegotiate. Here's the latest that we understand about his contract and his contractual clauses. How about Kevin Keats here on a Sunday night, the NC State coach, who picked up a 2-year automatic extension by winning the ACC tournament and a $100,000 bonus immediately payable on this year's deal. $100,000 bonus for winning the ACC tournament, and it renewed his contract with a raise, Kevin Keats at NC State, for 2 more years. That renewal means he's now making $3.1 million for the final 2 years of his deal on that. By the way, the Final Four appearance is worth another $100,000 for Kevin Keats. It's not bad to be him right now with his team winning, the NC State coach as an 11 seed. Listen, we've covered a bunch. I know we've got plenty of time to break down UConn, Alabama, Purdue, NC State. What else do you want to say about Sunday here and what we saw Sunday? We talked a lot about Saturday on the Saturday show, how dominant UConn was, the 3-point shooting of Alabama, fascinating matchup in Arizona. Again, if you're just joining us, that'll be the second game on Saturday night of the Final Four. First game up will be Purdue, NC State, just after 6:15 Eastern time or thereabouts. Again, the UConn Alabama game somewhere around 9 Eastern time. It will begin 6 Pacific time in Arizona. So we talked a lot about UConn and Alabama last night on the show. Anything else about Purdue or NC State that we have not covered here, Jason?
No, but I want to get your thought, because I know this is a topic that's going to be as important to you. That's breaking news today. Tell the audience about the women's 3-point line controversy, if they haven't heard.
So we have mayhem right now in the Portland pod, where they are playing Sweet 16 and Elite 8 games for 2 different regions, where, oh, by the way, the NC State ladies have knocked off Texas and have made the Final Four. The women are in the Final Four in Cleveland. The men are in the Final Four, headed now to Arizona.
And UConn can go double-double tomorrow if the UConn women win tomorrow. How about that?
That's correct. Then they're in it along with the men. But the controversy was discovered about an hour before the game in Portland between NC State and Texas, when the NC State coaching staff noticed that it did not look right for the first time this weekend, that in front of their bench, the 3-point line didn't look right. And sure enough, they had the NCAA officials and the arena officials with a tape measure. And the previous 4 games that were played, 2 on Friday and 2 on Saturday, were being played with a 3-point line that's about 8 inches longer than what it should have been, really the men's distance of college basketball, and the 3-point line. There's no overstating it. This is a horrific mistake by the NCAA, their operations people, to not have that straightened out. But here's another great question. How do you have 8 teams and 4 games played on that court Friday night and also Saturday night. Remember, they're playing 4 straight days for these pods, where in the different regions they played a Sweet 16 and then a Sweet 16, and then today an Elite 8 game and tomorrow an Elite 8 game. This is the 5th game about to be played on this floor. All 8 teams already played on the floor in the pod. How did nobody not notice that 3-point line is further back than the one at the other end of the floor? It's remarkable.
And here would be my 2 questions, just from a logistics perspective, from a rule book perspective. First of all, why is the men's and women's different lines, different distances? And 2, right, at 99% of these universities, the men and women play on the same court at their home venue. They're not putting 2 sets of courts down. It's 1 set of lines. So they probably play by the men's lines at all these arenas around the country through the regular season. Why aren't the 3-point lines the same?
Bear in mind, for women, not all of them play in the same arena. Some do, but not all of them do.
Most, right.
In the NCAA's case, these are custom-made floors, custom-made and painted, that are at these locations for the women's tournament and the men's tournament. While we talk about this, it's stunning that they would play 4 NCAA tournament games, where numerous teams are now saying we shot poorer from 3 at that end of the floor because it was roughly 9 inches farther back behind the line. And it's crazy.
How do they paint one end of the court different dimensions? At least if you're going to screw up, paint them both the same. Paint them both at the men's distance.
It's an oversight.
One end
and
of the
so
court?
the coaches were told that it would take over an hour to repaint that line and have the paint be able to dry.
Right.
And the NCAA was obviously getting pressure from ESPN and ABC. The game was being televised nationally on ABC, and it was going to screw things up for the double header that they were going to have on ABC, including the second game that was being played this afternoon. So remarkable. NC State goes ahead and wins the game. They played a 5th game with the 3-point line at one end being approximately 9 inches farther back on the arc than the other 3-point line. 5 total games played in Portland, and the NCAA, again, egg all over their face.
Yeah.
Horrific to have allowed this to go on. And for those that are criticizing, and rightfully so, that this kind of stuff never goes on in the men's tournament, how do you allow this to happen, especially when we're 3 days in? But I couch like maybe 25%. How are the teams playing on those courts, warming up, etc., not realizing we're a little further back at this end of the floor? How did somebody not realize it?
That's a great point. And in fairness, they screwed it up. There's no doubt they get all the blame, but it's not like one team had a more of an advantage because they both play 2 quarters at the same end. So they both equally go to the same direction. But you're right. Catastrophic error by the NCAA. And I hate to say it, it's not unexpected. The NCAA is not great at handling some of these things over time. And we've seen the women's, remember 3 or 4 years ago, the women had an outrage and they almost boycotted the tournament because their conditions to warm up in their weight room facilities and their training facilities when they were at these regional sites were well below par to what the men were dealing with. So remember that little controversy 3 or 4 years ago, and they've upgraded those accommodations a little bit, but apparently somebody in the architecture department screwed it up.
Well, and it's one of those two where, again, the NCAA contracts a company to custom make these courts and paint them. And until somebody paid attention, they didn't know. They didn't know any different. The NCAA was unaware of this until it was pointed out by the NC State coaching staff, because their bench was in front of that 3-point line arc, TV right. That's the first time that anybody knew anything or realized anything an hour before the game. By the way, we've got a Titanic women's semifinal, a doubleheader, essentially. Elite 8 games to go to the Final Four coming up tonight. NC State has already won, along with unbeaten number 1 South Carolina. They're in the Final Four. The other 2 pieces are 2 massive games, with LSU playing Iowa. Now, they're playing in Albany, New York, where presumably the 3-point arc is the correct distance. All right, so that's the first game at 7 Eastern time. Tomorrow night.
Monday night. I think it's Monday night.
It's tomorrow night, correct.
Tomorrow night. You said tonight.
I said tonight, my bad. Yeah. Monday night, first game, doubleheader, 7 Eastern time, thank you, is the rematch of the national title game. Caitlin Clark, Iowa, Angel Reese, LSU, probably going to have 7, 8, maybe 9 million people watching.
Yeah, that'll be huge.
The second game in Portland is UConn and USC. Yep. UConn with Paige Beckers, the perennial national champion contenders. USC with one of the top freshmen in the country. Best player at USC maybe in 30 years since Lisa Leslie. Juju Watkins is her name. Yep. That's the game on the Portland court, which we assure you will be painted correctly for Monday night, 6 Pacific, 9 Eastern time, thereabouts, somewhere probably about 9:15, 9:30 Eastern time. They'll play that game after Iowa and LSU for those 2 women's games. What a mess, though.
If you want to go check out about Juju, go to TrojanWire.com. Our guy Matt Zemek, if you want to read up on Juju, because she's had a tremendous year. And again, Paige Beckers, we know her story. 2 knee surgeries. She's coming back. She's arguably the best player in America. Gino Auriemma says she is. And then how about the LSU Iowa game with the story that came out about Mulkey yesterday? The little rivalry between kind of the Larry Bird, Magic Johnson, kind of little tension between Angel Reese.
Angel Reese said today, Angel Reese diffused it. They were having the women's press conferences in Albany while the games were going on for the men, and Angel Reese diffused it and said, I don't hate Caitlin Clark. She doesn't hate me. We're friendly. It's just between the lines. We're going to compete and go after it. So you kind of like that. You got to have a little villain, Brother Powers, a little love-hate, and you're going to have it. You're going to have it. For Monday night. So there you go in the women's tournament. Again, to recap.
That will get a monster rating on ESPN.
It is not an exaggeration to say it is transcendent stuff for the women's game. I mean, you're talking about the women's games in the tournament, not the championship game, generally get 1 million people to watch. Maybe if it's a massive thing like UConn, long win streak or whatever, they might get a couple of million to watch before the Final Four or before the championship game. There legitimately will be 7, 8, 9 million people watching on ESPN tomorrow night, and my hand is up. I'll be watching Caitlin Clark in Iowa with my women, etc., in my household against LSU for that first Elite Eight game. The third piece to the women's puzzle. The fourth piece to the women's puzzle, again, is USC and UConn with the court controversy in Portland. Crazy with that. Again, the men's Final Four is set. We knew UConn and Alabama. We now know NC State and Purdue. Everything covered now. Are we good on a Sunday night?
I think we're good. I'm sorry I'm not going to be on the Southwest Airlines direct flight to Phoenix with you. That will be a fun weekend for you. I know you got people, your peeps coming from all over the place.
We're coming all over the place. Matt Zemek, who lives locally in Phoenix, will be there. Tyler Jones, our buddy out of the Dallas-Fort Worth area with Chat Sports and the Jones Report. Ari Russell, my wingman on this college basketball coast-to-coast coverage for the better part of 20 years, will be there.
Our buddy Chris Adam.
Adam Zagoria will be there, our insider, our analyst from the Zags blog and also NJ.com. Also, our buddy Chris Stewart calling the play-by-play for Alabama. I'm looking forward to seeing everybody out there in the desert in Phoenix. And again, we'll have live coverage Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. Live coverage as well as the podcast feed, College Basketball Coast to Coast. So we know the Final Four. Jason, we know it's UConn and Alabama. We know it is Purdue and NC State. What a story. Purdue's not been there in 44 years. NC State has not been there in 41 years. Alabama's never been there. UConn looking for the repeat. First time since the Florida Gators 06-07. Crazy.
Tournament always delivers. Say what you want, who you're a fan of or whatever. This tournament virtually every year delivers.
It was amazing to watch all of it unfold this weekend, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. We began with 16 teams. We're now down to 4. Jason, great work. Thank you. We'll catch up with you again, get some thoughts from you on the Final Four later this week and this weekend. Thank you for watching on all of the platforms here on social media. You can rack this show back if you didn't get all of it on Facebook, on YouTube, on Twitter. Watch us from the beginning with the insight and the analysis. We're going to come your way later this week from the Valley of the Sun, State Farm Stadium, where it is Purdue and NC State up first on the floor, followed by UConn and Alabama. 2024 men's championship to be decided in the desert. We'll be there here as part of College Basketball Coast to Coast.